Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 9 and session 20 of the Business School Leaders Forum, brought to you by GoToWebinar by LogMeIn. Today's session is with Robert Lowe, Digital Services Director at McGraw Hill Education, and George Hulin, Associate Head of School for Student Experience at Coventry University. In a moment, Robert and George will be presenting on setting students up for course success in an online and hybrid world. But before I pass over to Robert, I'd just like to let everyone know that there will be polls, a live demo and a Q&A section at the end. So if you have any questions throughout these presentations, feel free to type them into the question bar, and we hopefully get a chance to ask them all at the end. So I'll now pass over to Robert, who can go into the presentation.
Thank you very much, and welcome to session 20. Pleased to be here today to discuss preparedness for entry into business schools in September and beyond. I'm really pleased to be able to co-present today with George from Coventry University. George, do you want to give people a little background of yourself?
Morning, everyone. My name is George Hulin. I'm the Associate Head of School for Student Experience in the School of Economics, Finance and Accounting at Coventry University. I have been in this role for almost 18 months now, but previously I was the course director or the program manager for all undergraduate finance degrees. And I have been using online learning platforms for almost 7 years now. Thank you.
Thanks, George. And as Paul mentioned, I'm Rob. I look after our digital services here at McGraw Hill. Been with the company around 10 years, working throughout Europe and Asia Pacific. So we've got lots planned today, really to sort of talk firstly what we're hearing from business schools and universities throughout the world in response to COVID-19 and how they want to prepare students for entry into higher education later this year. We're going to talk a little bit and dive deeper into the new Head Start program. And then we're going to hear from George how he and Coventry University have used the McGraw Hill platforms and the success and sort of honest feedback that he's seen, and then sort of taking you through sort of lots of sort of analytics that are possible if you'd like to start using any one of our platforms. But before we kick off, we've got a poll lined up, and Paul's going to cue that now.
Yeah, so the poll's gone live, everyone. So we'll wait for everyone to answer. We'll give it a few more seconds, and then I'll come over and give you the answers. Okay, so we have had. So the question was, what does September course delivery look like? And we have had 0% say same as normal, 25% say 100% online, 58% say lecturers virtually, seminars, workshops to be in person, and we have had 17% say other approach. So I'll pass back over to you, Robert.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone. That's certainly what we've been hearing from market. It'll be very interesting to maybe chat in those other approaches, because I'm sure everyone would sort of love to know what the sort of variety of delivery does look like. What we've been sort of hearing, throughout the world, as I mentioned before, lots of challenges around really what students are feeling ahead of entry into higher education. We know that with sort of lockdowns and sort of formal education changing, sort of country to country, month to month since sort of January, February, March, there's been lots of homeschooling. There's been no formal exams in some places. There's been a huge amount of concern around student anxiety and sort of feeling overwhelmed ahead of any sort of higher education starts later this year. But then, as we've been speaking to academics and business school leaders, there's been a sort of huge emphasis on understanding, what students sort of do and don't know, what that impact of maybe no formal exams or that sort of high stress environment that a school leaver would go through for their final exams. And then there's been a number of institutions that have started to look at how do we build out our own diagnostic testing, so we can truly support those students upon arrival to our institute. So what we've started to look at is how we can help. As many of you may know, McGraw Hill has a sort of wide range and sort of suite of solutions, both print and digital, adaptive and more traditional resources. So what we've been able to do is sort of pull together all of those things to create a solution that will hopefully help that pre-arrival confidence, not just for students, but also putting parents' minds at rest, sort of helping you support your staff at the business schools ahead of semester one, and really give those students a strong start as they sort of move into higher education study, and most importantly, sort of using the sort of data analytics that are possible to sort of reduce sort of students feeling overwhelmed and dropping out, and most importantly, close those knowledge gaps to support your teaching delivery. For those that have used Connect before, you'll know that it's an online platform with over 1,000 sort of different teaching and learning resources, with adaptive, personalised, embedded teaching resources for students and academics. So we work with hundreds of academics around the region and sort of globally. We have sort of normally around sort of 3 to 4 million students using Connect on a regular basis. Everything that you're about to see can also sync within your LMS or sort of VLE. So if you're using Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, Brightspace, any of the leading LMS tools, all the resources do sync seamlessly into those platforms, and obviously you're able to then sort of assign pieces of work to those students. So everything from sort of practice and reading through to formal assessment is possible. All of the resources is tagged to sort of various criteria, including Bloom's. So as I mentioned, we've taken the sort of best of Connect, and then we sort of integrated it with the feedback from the academic community to build out a solution called Connect HEADStart. We've built 4 different Head Start programs, so 1 for business and economics, and then 3 for the sciences. So before diving deeper into the solution, just a bit of an overview of what you're actually going to sort of find in there and what is possible for students. So firstly, everything is sort of set up and ready to go, or it can be curated and customized depending on how you want to set things up. So everything to really sort of be a completely standalone self study piece of work. So that's everything from a sort of welcome and orientation for students, health and well-being at university, sort of managing stress, dealing with sort of test stress and sort of group work, things like that. We've also included a downloadable online, offline student success manual, so a success in higher education resources that takes everything from sort of pre-arrival, getting your workspace set up for online learning, through to note-taking, avoiding plagiarism, everything in between. And then we have a series of short, adaptive, personalised introductions to the modules and disciplines that you would likely cover within your first year, or potentially sort of an MSc or an MBA program as well. And then there's the option to provide a diagnostic test for your incoming students to complete, to sort of to help you understand as a teaching team truly where those students are on their sort of learning journey pre-arrival, and to sort of help you deliver what is required. So the topic and sort of discipline area content, as I mentioned before, is all delivered through our adaptive engine, and we have sort of around about sort of 11 individual subject areas, and then a few sort of skills and communication areas. As I mentioned there just before, you know, what you see is sort of what's been sort of built for the sort of the traditional sort of delivery within a business school or an MSc. But obviously all of this can be further customized. So if you want slightly different content, if you don't need something, you can obviously sort of remove that. And as I mentioned before, if you've got a program specific that you want a sort of bridging pre-arrival resource to, maybe the students going in from second to third year or first to second year, or if it's a sort of MBA fast track, we can sort of build that out as well. All of the sort of resources have sort of been curated to sort of aid engagement. So one of the big things, especially with the 58% that are sort of using a sort of blended methodology, or those that are going 100% online, the big feedback has been that sort of application. How do we get students to understand and apply the sort of knowledge that they're gaining from those lectures? So what we've actually done is put our application suite, so a simulation suite within this resource. Now the simulations are actually available for a number of our sort of typical Connect platforms, but we've sort of brought in simulations to sort of give that bit of gamification application option as well. As I mentioned, there are lots of sort of study resources. We know that time on task and students always want to know how long things are going to take, so we sort of folded that in as well. And then we've also provided you with a sort of huge repository of practice material. So students, if you have students that really want to sort of practice for hours and hours and hours, you're able to do that as well. And then all of the analytics are available, so you can sort of truly understand the level of knowledge. And with regards to sort of delivery and rollouts, as I mentioned, this can be synced with the learning management system, Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, all of the sort of main VLEs. But we also sort of offer this, and it's sort of used widely as a standalone resource. We have sort of online, offline access as well, so it's sort of app-based and web-based as well. Now, with regards to sort of training and rollouts, this is completely possible. We are able to sort of do sort of socially distanced sort of in-person training, or we can sort of do complete virtual training depending on sort of how you'd like to roll things out. Again, if you're using Connect in your sort of full-time programs, we can sort of change that training path so we can sort of have that seamless transition from the Head Start program into the normal Connect. We've set this up initially as a 90-day license, so students have that from accepting a place at your course through to the early stages of their first semester. And then obviously you're able to see sort of weekly statistics, and we can sort of provide you with reports. It just depends on how you'd like to sort of administer things. And then finally, with that sort of self-study approach, we have a 24/7 academic support and also student support system as well. So we have email, chat, and phone support for any students that need instant help. So now I'm just going to jump into the live demo. So what you're able to see on screen is what a student would see if they were to enroll in the Head Start program. And for those that are familiar with Connect, if students were sort of using Connect for multiple courses, they would be able to sort of toggle between their different courses. So as I mentioned before, we've curated this, so we have the ability to provide that sort of onboarding. So this is complete sort of self-study. We also have all of the sort of help and support, so this can direct you straight to the local support, the sort of admin team, the IT team, so you're able to send messages to those. And then, as I mentioned, systematically sort of going through so lots of sort of health and wellness resources that are sort of focused around university study, and then that ability to provide resources to sort of maximise study online. So that sort of 58 and the 17% sort of that are sort of using a lot of online sort of resources and delivery. We have a huge amount of material for those students. And then as we start to move into those true required skills for university, you have the ability to set things like critical thinking, goal setting, and then sort of focused practice around maths and things like Excel, as well as communication and EQ as well. So as you can see here, there's some reading to give students information about the topic, and then some practice as well. And then as we move through, if your students have got sort of 5 or 6 first year modules, you're able to set a very brief intro reading. This is delivered through our adaptive platform, and then some practice. As this is the student side, they're able to see their report straight away, and then obviously as a teaching team, you're able to see those as well. And then most importantly, you're able to set a pre-arrival knowledge check. truly understand your students' levels of preparedness. So what that looks like in practice is a full student success manual. So you can see here on the left-hand side, all of the sort of different aspects of the student experience are taken into consideration. This is online and offline reader, so students have lots of sort of different tools, things like a read out loud, so this doubles as an audio book. So for students that English might not be their first language, they're able to sort of annotate, listen out loud, and sort of make highlights on this. As I mentioned, this is available on and offline for those students. And then as we get into the sort of preparedness parts, we have our sort of gamified approaches using our simulations and application-based learning. So this is one that sort of helps address students that are going into group work. So you're communicating with sort of first-year coordinators and your fellow students, and just you're able to sort of play out the different sort of challenges that you might face when sort of doing group work. You get instant feedback, and then obviously the teaching team will also get that feedback. Things like real-world preparation and sort of real-world tools and sort of resources that students might need to interact with, like Excel. We've sort of embedded lots of questions to help students understand the different sort of areas of Excel. So you have a short video and then questions, and then instant feedback as well. So students are also able to sort of use further resources to help them understand Excel a little bit more. And then with those topic-specific resources, as I mentioned before, and this is just a very sort of short intro to the different areas, and this is delivered through our adaptive reader, which is SmartBooks. So this is a traditional textbook with adaptive technology layered on, which means that students are able to sort of read the areas that you would like them to, based on the time that you'd like them to spend, and it sort of builds in sort of questions and reading material. So you can see here on the left-hand side, there's a practice button, and this allows students to answer questions, but together with their level of confidence, what you're able to see is a sort of a metacognitive report that shows the levels of conscious competency. So not only are students reading the intro to these topics, they're also gauging their level of confidence. So you're able to quickly see, are students aware of what they do and don't know? And then the reports will sort of help you close those learning gaps. So if students are continually thinking that they're correct and they're getting it wrong, that sort of highlights that, and you're able to remediate that very quickly. And also in line with that self-service, we have a coach built in that will talk students through. So here this is saying that I haven't read enough, so I can go back into reading here. But as I go through and read, there is a sort of color change to say that I've actually answered questions around descriptive statistics and that I know the topic. However, now moving through, areas that are highlighted yellow, I haven't yet mastered. So I would read and then jump into the practice. It's sort of flashing blue because it's saying that I haven't probably spent enough time reading. And if I was guessing, this is now showing that I'm sort of incorrect and aware. So it's showing that I'm confident that I'm sort of getting my sort of metacognitive sort of readout correct. So I've said that I don't know it and I've got it wrong, which is absolutely fine. The system will then sort of regenerate some practice material. It'll push me into reading, and I'll be able to jump back in as well. So this is taking me to reading, and this is available. So I've set this one up for a sort of 15 to 30 minute reading. This is available for every incoming sort of discipline that you may decide. And then finally, we have the sort of pre-arrival sort of diagnostic knowledge check. So again, so lots of variety in the questions. So this is for incoming sort of students on an economics module, and the relationship between sort of sports cars and sunglasses with production. So you have the sort of data, and then you have sort of various questions as well, and those would all go back in into the sort of reports. So students would see their reports, and then I'll sort of go through the analytics that the teaching team would see as well. So please feel free to pop in any questions about the platform, and I can sort of answer those at the end. With so many sort of conflicting priorities, we saw in March things sort of move from moving lectures and seminars online overnight, and then how are we going to do assessments, and where do we find the time to sort of put these things in place. So I'd just like to sort of walk you through a sort of few sort of questions, and then sort of talk around the sort of service and delivery. What's been built that you've just seen is able to be sort of used out of the box. We know that many different business schools sort of teach and deliver sort of their programs differently. So what we're able to do is start from scratch and sort of rebuild what you need. We can sort of tweak what we've already done, or we can sort of do a mixture of both. In the same way, if you have no time, you're able to give us a brief, and we can sort of build to a brief and a sort of timeline that suits you. We have obviously a lot of people that are already using Connect, and I think George will probably sort of talk to the sort of the seamless nature of that. We can literally push what you've just seen into your account today, so you can actually take the time to review that. Equally, if you've never used Connect before, just get in touch, and we can sort of set things up for you, whether that's for the Head Start or for sort of a finance module, or for a business statistics, management, marketing, or a full program. So we can sort of set that up along with an initial sort of walkthrough of the platform. And again, with regards to that sort of time crunch that we're hearing about, you're able to sort of set this, and if you want, forget it, and we can sort of send you a sort of report on the analytics on a sort of weekly, fortnightly, or monthly basis. So if you just literally want to sort of have a look at how things are looking for the incoming students in the sort of first, second week of September, or whenever your course next starts, we're able to give you those sort of analytics on demand as well, and also provide that student onboarding to sort of help answer any of their queries. And the age-old question around sort of budget and cost, we have obviously sort of various sort of license agreements with those on the call today, but this solution can sort of be added on to your existing sort of license agreements, or it can sort of be bought fresh, and the prices can sort of be as little as sort of 8, 10 to 15 pounds or euros, depending on the current provision that you have. Now, as I mentioned before, we have that sort of true end-to-end delivery and support. So once we'll go into each one of these sort of pieces in detail, but in general, you'll have a dedicated implementation consultant that would work with you to sort of rebuild and package the Head Start program, or the sort of the Connect program, depending on how you wanted to deliver things. We'd then be there to sort of help with that learner onboarding. So if that's in the summer for students that are still at home, we can provide sort of video walkthroughs, we can provide support to get students into the platform, and then provide you with those reports and deep sort of analysis to help you sort of formulate your teaching delivery sort of once your course starts. And as I mentioned earlier, that sort of 24/7 support we have available as well. And really, we sort of look in sort of historically, what that sort of end-to-end service has actually sort of given people is that sort of reassurance that we can actually sort of help sort of meet the sort of challenges that you're looking to address by sort of really tailored and personalised delivery plans, and then sort of focused feedback to really identify those learning gaps. If your target is to sort of increase sort of student retention, or sort of offset sort of the sort of dropout rate, and sort of ensure that your students are really well supported, not only from September onwards or whenever your course starts, but also from the middle of summer when they decide that they're going to be a student at your institute. This really sort of helps with that sort of seamless transition from now into their sort of full-time learning. And so rather than sort of hearing it from sort of McGraw Hill and myself, I'm pleased to sort of welcome back George, who's going to talk all about the sort of academic and student experience at Coventry.
Thank you, Robert. Before going into my slide and the questions I have, I just wanted to say thank you to you. Every time I watch a presentation around Connect, I always learn something new, even though I've used it for almost 7.5 years now. So just a bit of background. I started using Connect. I was using a different platform beforehand, but I started using Connect back in 2012, 2013. It was for a stage 3 module, so level 6, what we call level 6 nowadays. And we used to have roughly around 260 to 280 students each and every year. Now, these are questions that I have from fellow academics in the UK each and every time I discuss online learning platforms with them. Those that know me, they really know how keen I am on online learning for students and how much time I actually spend on understanding what students actually expect from higher education and so on, and how much time I actually spend into supporting that online delivery. So I always have around 3 questions that colleagues always ask. The first one is, how will it help students? And I can actually speak in particular after having used it for so many years, I can actually speak for 3-4 hours on this. But to keep it short, I would say that there are 3 or 4 different areas that students really benefit from. The first one is they actually, once you implement a platform like this, whether it's Connect or something else, but once you implement it, you give them ownership over their learning, which for a lot of students, it is extremely important. They don't really have to just wait for you to provide that, that learning material, teaching and learning material, but they have ownership over their learning. They can do quite a lot of stuff into these platforms that will help them understand. In my case, I forgot to mention, in my case, it has been corporate financial management, which was a module which was accredited by ACCA for the F9 paper. The second one is actually a freedom to get themselves tested, if you like. Now, historically, we've always had, we teach, test halfway through, teach, exam at the end, which, okay, maybe 15 years ago, it was quite interesting. It was the norm. But nowadays, I say nowadays, but actually I realized that going back to 2011, 2012, students actually had enough of that because it wasn't a continuous assessment process. It wasn't, they expected a lot more from you. And if you're someone like me, back in 2010, 2011, I was actually creating a lot of formative assessments for students. But the amount of time it took, it was just horrendous. And I really needed something that would help with that. So an online platform like Connect, it helped me massively by shifting that responsibility from me in terms of formative assessments, not in terms of summative assessments, by shifting that responsibility back to students. And they really enjoyed it. And then I would say something else which is extremely helpful for students is the fact that they achieve a very deep learning. It was quite interesting because we decided a couple of weeks ago to do this presentation. And last week I had an email I had a text from a student on LinkedIn who asked me whether I can provide access to the platform. He's one of our alumni. He graduated around 4 years ago, and he asked me if I could open the platform because he remembers quite a lot of stuff, but he had some case studies that he created on the platform, and he wanted to get access to them again. So the fact that a student who graduates and 3-4 years later actually manages to remember 80 to 90% of what we learn in that module is extremely helpful. And that was possible. And from what students were saying, it was possible because as you saw from what Rob was showing us, the platform, I always used to say that the platform plays with students' brain a bit, with students' mind, because it tests the level of confidence they have, which I've never really seen in any other platforms, although I've used 3 in total during my academic experience. It kind of pushes students to get a very good understanding of what they know and what they don't know, which is extremely helpful. Now, in terms of how it helps academics, Again, it's a very long discussion here, but to keep it short, I would say the first thing, which is extremely important, is the fact that it allows you to embed assessments in your teaching and learning. I have very rarely seen an academic who doesn't take pride in teaching students, supporting their learning process, and so on, and doesn't want to give students a bit more experience, a bit more testing facility, a bit more assessments, formative assessments. I mean, I'm not very keen on summative assessments. If I had the choice, I'll probably just spread the summative assessments throughout the semester. I think it's very ineffective to just have one test after 3-4 weeks and then another exam after 6-7 weeks. I think that really doesn't help at all. So I think in terms of helping academics, the fact that you can embed assessments so well throughout the, I mean, it is basically, it takes a bit of time, and I'll speak about the time investment in a bit, but it actually helps embed the assessments throughout the semester. So basically each and every week, you give students a chance to learn in class with you. You can have pre-class learning material on the platform, pre-class testing, which is quite interesting. I mean, how many times would you give a student a formative assessment, for example, for the lecture that you're going to have next week? Because students will usually say, well, you haven't really taught me yet, so you can only test me once you teach me. But because you shift quite a lot of the learning back to students, that's actually quite possible, because you can test them on the generic concepts that they have to know for next week, which is very useful. And then I would say again, and I said this, I'm quite lucky. I'm very lucky, because pretty much all my colleagues have this pride of helping students, and that's extremely important. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why Coventry is doing so well in terms of student experience, is because we want to help students learn. We want to help students achieve that very deep learning. And Robert was showing you the analytics that you can get, and that's something fascinating, because I mean, if you're an academic who is really engaged into the teaching and learning process, you can really help students a lot by looking at those analytics that you can get. They are quite daunting to begin with. If you're not very used with statistics and with analyzing big data, it takes quite a bit of time to understand it. But once you understand all the analytics, you really know exactly how you can help students, which is for me, it has been extremely helpful. I mean, in my case, for example, for a module with 280 students, to have roughly 7 to 10 students who would fail the module is just something, you know, never seen before. And then last but not least, I would say something which is very useful, and a lot of academics are usually complaining about this, quite understandably, I would say, because I mean, if you look at how the society and how education has developed in the last 10 years, students will have a lot of distractions. And actually, if you ask a student to watch a video which is, you know, an hour and a half long to replace the lecture, and I'm really happy to see the results of the poll, because we think just the same as Coventry. That's what we expect to happen in September. If you ask them to watch a 1 hour and a half lecture, they won't. They'll start, and after 15 minutes, they'll think, yeah, okay, I understand everything, and they're missing an hour and 10 minutes of very important, of vital information. So actually, if you create, if you take the time to put this platform together, it actually helps because you help students be engaged throughout the semester, and they don't even realize it. I have to say, most of the time, students don't realize how much time they spend in the platform. They get really attracted by the fact that, oh, I can do another question, and when I don't know the answer, it will tell me where to go to read, and so on. So that's extremely helpful. In terms of whether the time, the investment of time is really worth it, I would say it goes without saying. Yes, if you want to do it right, it will take you a couple of hours to set it up. It'll take you probably around 3 to 4 hours, in my opinion, just to set it up for the entire semester. But help is always out there. I remember the first time I set it up and the amount of help I got from McGraw Hill back then, and the team was quite small from what I remember. So I can imagine nowadays that the team is much larger and there's more support in place. Once you set it up, if you use the same platform from year to year, I would say you don't really need more than an hour and a half during the following academic year to make sure it is up to date. And you'll always see something that can be done better in the platform. And if you're a very critical academic like myself, you'll pretty much almost every year you'll start afresh because you think, oh, okay, I can do this one better and I can give them a bit more homework there. Last year students struggle in this area, so I can give them something more here. But I would say it goes without saying, at least for me. And actually, and I'll wrap up with this. We started with one module in 2012, 2013. Now we have around, at any one time, we'll have around 12 to 15 modules with around 1,000, 1,200 students that actually use Connect. So it wasn't just me who thought that the investment of time is worthwhile. It's actually quite a lot of our colleagues have done it as well. Thank you. Robert, back to you.
Thanks, George. Yeah, that was really, really helpful on the insights. And as George mentioned, everyone's got sort of different statistical analysis packages. Within the platform, there's a suite of sort of around 10 to 15 different reports, depending on how you want to sort of drill sort of down. A lot of these reports are actually sort of exportable into sort of CSV, Excel files, so you're able to sort of do deeper data analysis with your own tools as well. One of the sort of first reports that are available for use is an online engagement indicator. So this really just sort of takes into consideration everything to give you a little bit of an insight into students that potentially you might want to sort of reach out and individually support. So you can see here, almost 350 students, but very quickly you can see that there might be 14 that need your attention very quickly. Also, as you're starting to plan the delivery for your sort of your next sort of rollout of the program, whether that's September or you've got sort of summer programs, you're able to quickly see sort of individual areas that students might be struggling with. So as you can see here, 2 questions in the middle, 94% of students are getting the 1 question right, but then 4 in 10 students are actually struggling with a question. So you're able to sort of use that question maybe for a 5-minute Microsoft Teams video or something that you're sort of wanting to record to quickly say, everyone that's struggled on this, this is the sort of steps to answer this correctly. Or if you're in a sort of a socially distant seminar or workshop, you could potentially get one of the 58% of students that got it right and sort of talk their peers through how they approach the question. And as George said, that sort of big data, when you've got a huge number of students in a course, it's very, very important to sort of be able to sort of drill down very quickly. And one of the ways that we've been able to do this is the relationship between sort of time spent and the scores that students are getting. So you're able to very quickly see that distribution and identify struggling students or students that need specific support. So what I've identified here is a student that's actually spent a significant amount of time in relationship to the wider student cohort. So they're, as you can see, spending almost 16 hours, but are only averaging 47% in their assignments. So you're able to then quickly drill down by clicking on the assignment button and personalize your help very quickly. And then on the flip side, the pieces of work that you're setting students, you're able to see how they're performing in comparison to each of the work that's being set. So again, sort of drilling in to one here that is along that sort of line. So that line is customized. We set that at 70% as a score. So anything below that line might be worth sort of investigating a little bit more intensely. And again, what you're able to see here is, okay, there's a quiz that lots of students have spent, doing. So there's only 1 student that hasn't submitted their score, and they've all been spending on average 1 hour, but their average score is quite low. So you can quickly see the topics in which those questions come from. So again, maybe a quick 5-minute video to remediate that learning, or maybe sort of setting 2 or 3 practice questions ahead of the next seminar, or sort of using it as a class discussion. So you can quickly see from 338 students using this on a regular basis, you can quickly see in 2 clicks an individual student's understanding of the subject matter, and then also the delivery, and sort of critically sort of evaluate the sort of pieces of work that you're setting as well. And sort of now, just to sort of, I guess, sort of bookend that sort of analytics. As I say, all of those things are possible within the system, but George is going to sort of talk through the sort of outcomes that have been seen at Coventry, and the sort of suggestions and sort of honest feedback, from the use of the platform. I think it was really interesting that he was talking about the time that it takes, that there is that sort of time at the start. But as he mentioned, we have a support team in place that can sort of help with that. But to roll this out, there would be a little bit of time investment, and he's going to talk to you a little bit more about, sort of if it's worth it, and the considerations moving ahead.
Thank you, Rob. Right, in terms of the real outcomes at Coventry, and again, most of the time, I will get around 5-6 questions from colleagues, and I'll say colleagues, but fellow academics. I call everyone a colleague who is an academic at a national and international level. We're all working towards the same objective, I suppose. They always kind of ask around 4 to 5 questions, which kind of sit under 3 different themes. How does it impact students? Do they actually like it? And especially if they don't use a platform, an online platform, they always say, okay, you have all this experience. Can you give me any suggestions as to how we can roll it out? So, in terms of the real outcomes at Coventry, it is quite difficult for me to tell you how it positively impacted students' performance, because we've never really done a proper study on how student performance has been positively impacted. Unofficially, we've seen it. When you take a module with 280 students, or another module, I can give you an example, with around 400 students, and those students go into the summative assessment. The summative assessment, go really confident. Their average mark is around 63%. The average module mark all of a sudden becomes 60 to 65%. And you actually see how much time students spend in the platform. Now, for me, that's a truly positive impact that an online platform has on students. We don't have a specific, peer-reviewed study that will show all this data, and it is a shame, and it is something that we have been looking at for quite a while. But I don't feel we have, 6-7 years worth of data, and going back 7 years, it's actually not a lot of students, but probably around 280 to 300 students 7 years ago that were using it. But I would say, in terms of real outcome, is that there's something else that is extremely, it's quite nice to actually see. The motivation that a lot of academics have to implement something like this. I can give you, and going into the second question of how do students actually feel about it? Do they actually like it? Do they not like it at all? Do they think it's something else on top of already, hundreds of research papers we ask them to read and hundreds of questions they have to do? I kind of always use this example, and I think some people find it quite interesting. When I first started, again, I think it was around 270 students that I had the first time I delivered that module with Connect. And I was really anxious. I didn't know how students would like it and so on. And we have a questionnaire for students. It's not at the end of every module. It's not at the end of the module. It's kind of around after 7 weeks of teaching in an 11-week semester. After 7 weeks, when I got the feedback from students, I was really anxious, and I thought, oh, this is going to be quite strange, because it was the second time I was teaching the module, but the first time with Connect. And I went full in with Connect. I really used it for pretty much everything. Satisfaction went to 94, 95%, which was actually the first time. The previous year when I delivered the module, it was around 71%. So to go from 71 to 95, you think, okay, maybe they liked it, and maybe they liked, some other changes we implemented in the module, but the big change was the fact that we used Connect. But in terms of narrative, in terms of feedback, the proper feedback we got from students, it was very negative. And it was negative not in the sense that they didn't like it, but it was negative in the sense that they absolutely loved it, but they didn't like the fact that it came in too late, because this was a year 3 module. So when I was reading the entire feedback, I thought, it made me feel terrible, because I said, well, I did something which students really enjoyed, but in the same time, I kind of made their life difficult, because now they see what they could have had at stages 1 and 2, at year 1 and 2. So what we actually had to do after that is we started to work with, and I was the digital literacy lead of the school back then. And I had to start working with some other colleagues to start implementing it at earlier stages, because actually, again, feedback, although the satisfaction was extremely high there, feedback highlighted a significant gap we had at previous years. And once we started to do that, once we started to implement it at years 1 and 2, we actually had students where, in some cases we would implement it at stage 1, and at stage 2 we would leave it out for a week or 2 just to see whether students would ask for a platform like this. And we always had cases where students said, why don't you guys use something, they said, why don't you use the Connect? And we thought, oh, okay, they actually want it. I think something else you have to consider, and maybe I should have, and it's my mistake, and I apologize, I should have clarified this from the very beginning. Coventry University purchases all the textbooks for students. So when we purchase the textbooks, it's a massive investment. It's millions and millions of pounds every year. But when we purchase the textbooks, we include Connect as well. So every student will have the Connect code. And we've had Connect, the API, embedded within Moodle. We use Moodle. We're shifting to Aula from September, and it will be embedded within our VLE. Which is extremely good. Now, in terms of suggestions for rollout, I always, and I remember I had a discussion with another academic back in, I think it was March, just before we went into lockdown. And we were discussing, okay, how can we implement it? And I said, well, for me, I've always heard it. Academics always say, well, this is not the right time. It takes quite a lot of time to do it. There's never a right time to introduce an online learning platform. But pretty much any time you can introduce it, it's absolutely perfect. I mean, now even more than before with lockdown, with the fact that a lot of teaching is online, it's extremely helpful. Yes, it takes a bit of time, and I'm the first one to say, if you do it right, it will take some time to put it together, but the results will be extremely appreciated by students. Another thing, as a suggestion for rollout is obviously to watch the cost. And Rob mentioned, I'm not going to go into the cost. All I know at our school level, we put it down in the spreadsheet and we send it to our colleagues from library, and they just purchase it. I know, but we have institution-wide agreements. So I would say, I mean, from 4 different faculties on campus, I know colleagues in pretty much each and every faculty that use quite a lot of textbooks with the Connect. So, but that's something that obviously, we can't really hide behind the fact that there is a cost, but the cost, I think the benefits, at least in finance and corporate financial management, the benefits really outweigh the cost massively. And then a final suggestion, and this is something that a lot of colleagues find it quite strength, work with a company that provides the platform. For me, that has been a true game changer. I don't want to mention, I was using another platform beforehand. Back in 2011, I was using a platform from another huge publisher, and the support I had was just horrendous. And unfortunately, you know, I was really disappointed and I almost lost faith. So back in 2012, when I introduced Connect, I wasn't really positive about it, because I thought, well, I'm just going to have to do all the work myself, and if I don't understand the platform, I'm really going to struggle, and it will put so much pressure. But fortunately, it was pretty much an experience 180 degrees away. It was absolutely amazing to actually see how much support I managed to get, and how much support my colleagues get now. We have a new module, a stage 1, going live in September. And I think we expect around 350 students, and our colleague came to ask me about Connect and what I did, and how can we introduce it at, in her module, and I think it was less than a week and a half, and pretty much everything was done by McGraw Hill. So that's extremely helpful, and to actually have a team behind you that will constantly reassure you if something goes wrong. We're always here. It's extremely helpful, because I don't know about people on the call, and I'm good with IT. I understand how it works, but if something goes wrong, I don't know what to do, and I need someone to actually always be there if platform crashes. I need that support, and that's why I would constantly work with the company. Right. That's these are my suggestions. I know we can think of so many others. I think we're going into the Q&A, Rob.
Yes, thanks, George. That was really insightful. And I'll pop my contact details on if obviously anyone needs to sort of run and sort of get more information. Please feel free to reach out to me and sort of let me know what you need, and we can get things sorted. But for now, is there any questions? Paul, I'm not sure if there's been anything that's come through the session, or if people are putting those questions in now.
Yeah, so we've had some questions come in, so I'll start with the questions. We've got a bit of time for Q&A. So the first question is, in terms of learning outcomes, does the platform allow for comprehensive assessment, and does it have the ability to grade students across learning objectives?
Yeah, correct. So all of the questions within the platform are tagged. So you're able to then run what we call a category and item analysis report within the system that gives you that granular detail. So that will sort of give you answers from a particular sort of area of the teaching resources, or it might be sort of any questions that are tagged as Bloom's level 1 or 2, and there's lots of methods, sort of data tagging to give you those in-depth granular reports.
Amazing. So we've got another question. We deal with a slightly older group of students who usually have not visited a formal classroom setting for a few years. Do you have any suggestions on helping this group with getting into blended programs?
My suggestion would be sort of putting very accessible pieces of work first up. So something like that SmartBook adaptive experience could be quite daunting for someone that's been out of formal education for a while, but we're able to actually sort of assign sort of I guess sort of more traditional resources within the same platform, and then transition those students into sort of maybe more adaptive learning tools. But also our sort of onboarding, what we call first day of class. We have a variety of options available, so we can provide in-person support virtually, or actually sort of coming to that sort of first delivery to walk students through the platform. We also have the option of doing a drop-in surgery immediately after those sort of first classes. And then we have a students, what we call a Student Success Academy, that is a self-help repository that students can also go to. George, I'm not sure if you have any sort of mature students and in your programs.
I was going to say, Rob, I found the more mature students within my module at level 3 and within my other module at master's level at postgraduate, I found they engaged a lot better with the platforms than, well, the more younger generation of students. And I always found they are a lot keener on learning more. And when you show them how to use the platform, when you show them how to use the ebook, they really enjoy it. And finally, I'll never forget, we had a cohort, I think it must have been around 2016 or maybe 17, when the majority of students were, well, I wouldn't say more mature, but older than 30, let's say, or some of them 40. Or my oldest student was 63. So they actually were super excited because they were using something they never used before. And I remember a student I had from Spain, I think he was probably around 41, 42. And he was super excited. He finally saw what an ebook was and how to get tested. And the analytics, he did the best in the analytics, but that was because he was pretty much every day he was going in the platform. He was very excited about it. So I found they engage really well, I have to say.
Fantastic. So I think another question, I think it's more targeted to you, George. So the question is, what insights have you gathered over the past 3 months into how business schools are managing their way through a crisis? What success stories and innovations have you seen?
Well, I can tell you, for example, what we did in our school. It took us less than a week, maybe a week and a half, to shift 77 exams from being face-to-face exams to being online. It took us less than 3 days to train all our colleagues on how to record videos using software like Big Blue Button, using Screencast-O-Matic, using Microsoft Teams. Obviously, we all use Microsoft Teams and Zoom nowadays. It's been extremely helpful for the modules where we already had online learning platforms to actually, we've used them as best practice. And because a lot of the publishers have opened their platforms even more after the lockdown, as you said, in the last 3-4 months, we implemented it at a much higher level. So, and I kind of, my expectation is that from September onwards, we'll probably have around 25 to 30 modules that will have an online teaching, an online learning platform. And going back to the poll we had at the beginning, our expectation is that obviously lectures are out of discussions. I mean, if you can imagine, we had lectures with 290 students in one big room. That's not going to happen. Now, how do we actually help students learn the concepts in my example, in corporate financial management or financial reporting and so on? That will be extremely important. And I think, asking colleagues to all of a sudden shift completely from face-to-face teaching to online teaching without the support of an online platform, it will be extremely difficult. It's one of those things where, it's something new for students, it's something new for staff, and you really want to be reassured by, having something behind you which has been curated nicely. But in terms of best practices, I mean, you can find, if you want to have a discussion, you can find my account on LinkedIn, you can text me there and we can have a chat. That's no problem at all. But it is something we've had to adapt very, very fast to online teaching and learning, and in particular to supporting students who, we've pretty much had students that, because they had to go back home, and being in Coventry, it's not, I mean, we have probably more than half of our students are international. We've had students from all the way from Brazil to Japan. So, time constraints and everything else, we've really had to adapt to that. And all of a sudden, I think the key word that we've actually shifted to is, or the key words, 2 different words, is bite-sized sessions. It doesn't work if you record a lecture which is an hour and 40 minutes long, an hour and 30 minutes. students get bored. They don't watch them. They will watch them for half of the time, and then they won't engage. So bite-sized sessions for us made a huge difference. Yeah.
Brilliant. So we've got time, I think, for one last question. So I'll put it forward to both of you. So the question is, I'm really interested in exploring more gamification to enhance our online learning. How can you strike the balance between this being engaging but not too basic, and useful but not like an exam? So I don't know who wants to go first, George or Rob?
Rob, if you want to cover the IT.
Yeah, sure. So I think it does. There's sort of two things. Is that what part of that learning cycle and journey does the simulations sort of come in? So we know there's a lot of universities that actually completely overhaul a module and have a sort of simulation application-based sort of module. So they'll do the sort of the theory and then sort of applying it with that sort of simulation tool. I know at Coventry they actually have a sort of simulation suite. The suggestions here would be that we've actually sort of broken. We have sort of simulation games across our sort of business and economics portfolio. We've actually sort of broken those down so they can actually be sort of assigned as sort of 10 to 15 minute pieces, or they can actually be assigned as sort of more exhaustive sort of group work. So for instance, in marketing, you can become a sort of marketing team and actually sort of make decisions for every sales quarter, whereas we also have sort of ABAs, the application-based assignments that are actually sort of 10, 15 minutes. So you might have just read a smart book, you've read the theory, and now you can apply it sort of based on a real world situation within a simulation. So, that could be a participation grade. It could be a sort of formal setting. It could be part of the group work for grades. So depending on how the sort of simulations, sort of want to sort of sit within the learning experience, whether it's for practice, an application or assessment, we can sort of modify the delivery in both ways.
I agree with what Rob said, in particular around making it as realistic as possible and having it as a group work and so on. I think, and all the simulations we've used, and boy, we've used a lot of simulations in our teaching in the last 5-6 years. They have been the items that students really like the most. To actually, if you can imagine, for a student at year 3, they haven't signed a lease contract like ever before. And to allow them to have a simulation, which is 100% realistic, to allow them to have a simulation as if they were the financial director of, I don't know, EasyJet, and they were signing a contract to lease out a plane, and to have the entire simulation. I can imagine now all the tables we have, and you make a small change to the interest rate and then the impact it has on everything else, and you make a small change to the monthly payment and then the impact it has on your financial statement, on your income statement, on your payments and so on. That's something that students really, really, really enjoy. And if I can give you some, a small advice, having an online platform without simulations, it's something that students will eventually get. They will have enough of testing and testing and testing and testing. They actually want to see how, if you can imagine the online platform to be the platform that helps you create the bridge between the theory in the book and the industry and the real life case studies and the industry itself. That's how I see the platform with the simulations. When you have, when you have test after test after test without any simulations, students don't really, they enjoy it to begin with, but then they kind of have enough and think, yeah, okay, just give me the summative assessment and that's it. But when you tell them, okay, we've done dividend policy and we spoke about the retention ratio of, or the plowback ratio of specific companies. Here's a simulation, and change the numbers yourself and see how things actually help you understand. I'm making a small change here. What's the cascading effect of what, of that small change? And I can see the point of the question. How can you make sure it's not just a trivial, just a trivial simulation? Because most of the time simulations are like that. Oh, okay, we have simulations, we do simulations in class and so on. Yeah, you make some small changes and so on, but that doesn't give students simulations, and the type of simulations we've used from the platform are the ones that actually give students full flexibility to see how, because actually, again, I mean, come on, we've all worked in the industry. We are working and collaborating with the industry. The industry hits you with different things each and every day, and that fluctuation into the factors is extremely helpful to give students that opportunity to see the impact in a real life simulation.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. That was fantastic. So unfortunately, we seem to be out of time for this session. But just before we do go, we've got 2 more sessions taking place this afternoon. The first session is at 2 p.m. BST with Angus Lang, Dean of Lancaster University. Angus will be presenting on environment crises, evolution, and the future of business schools. Following Angus's session at 2 p.m., there'll be a session at 3:30 with Tanya Roquette, Solutions Director at Full Fabric, and Olivia Matthews, Chief Marketing Officer from Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, and they'll be presenting on the future of higher education admissions. So I've added in the chat bar links where you can register for these sessions. So if you'd like to register those, just use those links. Also inside the link, there is a link for the virtual exhibition. So if you'd like to schedule an appointment with McGraw Hill Education, you can just use that link and it will take you directly to them. Just before we go, I'd like to thank George and Rob again for an excellent presentation, and thank you for taking the time out to present today. And we look forward to seeing everyone in the afternoon session. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.